Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries, a new podcast spotlighting the people and stories behind your favorite Conejo Valley small businesses. I'm your host, Christina Denstead. In today's episode, we're talking to Danielle Borja, President and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. As President and CEO, Danielle leads one of the largest chambers in the state of California, with over 700 business members, serving the cities of Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, and Agoura Hills. I thought it was fitting to end season 1 with Danielle, as she has a different perspective to the Conejo Valley business community. Not only will you learn about Danielle's career journey in this conversation, you'll also get a deep dive into the workings of the chamber, what it was like to take on the CEO role 2 months before the pandemic, and all of the opportunities for big and small businesses to get involved. Listen to the end to see how to win 2 VIP tickets to the Taste of Conejo, the chamber's signature event held in October. With that, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Danielle Borja. Before we get started, I'm excited to share that one of our previous guests, Marina Edelman, licensed marriage and family therapist and owner of Edelman Counseling in Westlake, is generously offering Conejo Valley Visionary listeners 20% off their first therapy sessions booked with an Edelman Counseling associate. Visit edelmancounseling.com. That's edelmancounseling.com to book your appointment today. When checking out, write Visionaries in your appointment note to redeem this offer. This offer applies to Edelman Counseling Associate appointments. If you have not listened to Marina's amazing story from financial analyst turned therapist, go back to episode 5 and have a listen. Hey, Danielle, welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries.
Thank you, Christina. Great to be here.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for joining. And I am so excited. You are the last guest of our first season of Conejo Valley Visionaries. And I think it's the most fitting way to end this season by speaking to you, the president and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce, giving us like a different take on what it's like to be part of the business community here in the Conejo Valley. So thrilled to hear your story and learn more about how the chamber helps businesses around the area. So thank you again for joining.
So excited. And you're a little bit familiar with our chamber because you were one of our 40 under 40s previously.
Yes, I was. Thank you. I know. And that was my first exposure to the Chamber of Commerce. And now having interviewed several members of the Chamber of Commerce, it's really neat to see kind of what you guys are doing. So I think the listeners will be excited to learn more about how to get involved and also those kind of programs that you're doing for business leaders or, those of us trying to do some cool things here. So we'll get into that in a minute. But first, what we like to do with this podcast is kind of go back to the beginning. So when you were growing up as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? What did you study in school?
Well, when I was a child, I wanted to be a vet. And my passion was around horses. I had a horse growing up and I thought I wanted to be a large animal vet. Mm-hmm. And then not too long after, I had an experience where I realized I could not stand the sight of blood. And so I decided that veterinary was probably not meant to be in my line of work in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So then I went on to study marketing. I studied marketing communications at California Lutheran University, and then I continued on to get my MBA.
And did you grow up in the Conejo Valley?
I did. I was born and raised in Newbury Park, so I've been in Conejo Valley my whole life, and I just feel really honored to be able to, grow up here and to be able to create a life here for my family and have my girls grow up in the same area that I get to call home. I always, tell people that I was born at Las Robles and my 3 girls were born at Las Robles, and I think that's really special.
That's really amazing. I do feel like this community, it's not that unusual that people grew up here and stay here too. It's been fun in these conversations over this whole season to hear from people like you who are from here and have then built their business here, but others though that are moving from Indiana or out of state and have relocated here and seeing how in both instances, they really feel this like sense of community and belonging and like wanting to be a part of the community. So both sides are awesome. Are you a horseback rider now, or do you still have horses in your life?
No, I do not, but my oldest daughter does ride a little
Okay.
bit just recreationally,
Yeah.
locally as well. So I get to have a little taste of the horses through that. But
Good.
yeah, it's um, they're special creatures.
Yeah. So what drew you to marketing?
I think originally I wanted to be in advertising, and that was, kind of that creative aspect is really what I was drawn to. And as I got a little bit deeper into actual kind of studies, the more kind of management operational side paired with that creative really drew me in.
Mhm.
My goal was always to be a VP of marketing. That was kind of when I was going through university, what my end goal was. But I always tell people, especially, interns and younger people that I'm working with in the community, that, your path is going to be always unique, and to not try to draw too hard of a line to where you necessarily want to go, because life has a funny way of taking you in the direction you're meant to be.
Yes, that is excellent advice. And when you graduated with your marketing degree, then you decided immediately to go and get an MBA?
I took a little bit of a break. I was working full time as in event production. So when I graduated, I was interning at Caruso, who owns a variety of shopping centers locally. And we had worked with a production company on one of our events there. And I had kept relationships going. And when I graduated, I called them up and said, "Hey, do you need a production assistant? I'm graduated, I'm ready." And it all worked out for me to kind of go over and have that experience in the live event production world. So I got to work with companies like Anthem and Jafra and do experiential marketing campaigns. And I think that that comes in really handy with the work that I do today. Live production doesn't wait for anyone. So if you're doing an event and something goes awry, as long as it's not on the stage, right? As long as the audience doesn't know, that's what I always kind of tell my team.
What then drew you to go further into business studies?
So when I was doing live events, I kind of then pictured myself on the client side of the table, being the one to hire the event production company rather than being on the production side. And so I thought it would behoove me to go ahead and get my master's. And it actually ended up being a little challenging at the time because there was a lot of travel involved in my role. Um, at the time, it wasn't this hybrid world and online classes everywhere. And so it was kind of having a conflict between my ability to meet what I needed on the school side and also the professional side. And so I left the live production, actually went into retail management for a little bit while I finished up my MBA during that time.
Got it. Yeah, I can imagine balancing those schedules, especially with something like event production, would be really tough. And would you recommend that that folks do that though? I mean, are you with your MBA, were you happy ultimately that you went and explored that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it gave me a really good foundation for the next chapter, which I ended up back at Caruso as their director of marketing for their West Valley region. So my journey is, a little more circular in nature, kind of starting as an intern there and then ending up they're in a very different role, obviously. But then also having the retail management background during that time led me to a different perspective working with our retailers in the shopping center environment as well. So I think all of those different skills kind of build on each other. I was then in a client role, dealing with vendor relationships, production, things of that nature. So all those kind of stepping stones along the way led me into a really good, foundation for that role. And I think everything just builds on each other when you kind of talk about transitions and careers and shifts. So it's just very interesting. It's not something that was planned that way in any kind of order, but I think it just ends up working out to that degree.
Yes. And as a director of marketing, what types of marketing were you overseeing then? I think marketing, as also a marketer, I feel like it's evolved so much what marketing means in the past couple of decades. And I'm just curious, like at that point, what was part of the responsibility?
Yeah, so we had 5 outdoor shopping centers that we were working with, and all of them looked a little bit different, but there was event execution on site. So anything that would increase traffic for our retailers was really what we were looking at from a marketing standpoint, which went from on-site signage to announce new retailers to driving event production, working with local ad agencies, all those kind of different elements. But really, it was the retailer relationships to really build that, to make sure we really understood their customers and their needs. And then we could kind of incorporate that from an overall strategy for the entire center. Obviously, someone who is a boutique is going to be a very different customer than someone who's going to, Ralph's or, stopping for a movie and ice cream. And so also thinking about all of those different uses on property and trying to get people to spend more time on property and not just destination shop for one location, and how you get them across property to experience different tenants was one of the things we spent a lot of time doing.
That's such a interesting metric, and one that I wouldn't think of, but I can imagine is important for a mall. And, as I hear you speak about what you were thinking about in that role, how much that applies to probably what you're doing now, which is, as the president and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce, how did you make your way there? Was that while you were still at Caruso, or what was the transition like into that role?
Yeah, so I actually transitioned to the chamber from Caruso as their director of events for the chamber. And, when I came to the chamber, I had my oldest daughter was 1, and they had a mid-management layoff at Caruso. So I took about a year off while I looked for kind of the next step in my journey. And I obviously coming from private sector and then kind of looking at the nonprofit world, it was a referral from one of the board members at Caruso. So kind of everything, kind of those relationships in the journey continue. And it was actually the gentleman who gave me my first intern at Caruso internship that referred me for this job at the chamber.
Wow,
So,
you really like all the dots are connected. That's incredible.
And I, was like, oh, the chamber, I'm not sure, honestly. It wasn't the role I had envisioned, stepping into next. And, the CEO at the time said, look, I, understand that this is, maybe we have a lot to offer you here in terms of flexibility with your young child. And, I think this will be really great for you from a community standpoint. And, I decided that at that time, that's kind of what I needed, was that flexibility. And, I'm a very driven person. And so I knew I would get the job done, but just having a bit of, being able to get to those school events and get to the drop-offs and the pickups and all the things in between was really important to me. And so I decided I would give it a go. And, and then 12 years later, here I am still, which again, not necessarily what I thought would lead to this role. And so in 2019, our CEO at the time announced that she was retiring, and basically asked me to succeed her in the role. And I had never honestly envisioned myself in this role. I was so invested in my position. I loved my position. I thrive in the event space, and I love creating environments and seeing people experience, create different, the feeling of an event and people walking into a space that you've created. It's very hard to replicate that kind of emotion if you've been on that side of it. You think about when you plan a wedding and all the pieces come together and you're finally walking down the aisle, right?
And I feel like it's one of those rare jobs where you there's all the planning, but then you get to actually see it happen and experience it and get to the other side. That doesn't, I don't know, it feels like a very unique situation, and you get to participate in it too. So
yeah. And like when we have interns come in, I love when they work on the event side and they get to see something from start to finish, because
sure.
they really can kind of see the progress along the way and then what that actually looks like to come to reality. But going back to, I was very just invested in my role. I wasn't kind of, looking for the next thing. I was then, had 3 girls. I had 2 daughters while I was in that role. And, I just love this team and I love this community so much. And, but that kind of opportunity kind of, just found me to a certain degree. And I decided I would, take a bet on myself and go ahead and step into, being familiar with the organization, the relationships, very helpful, but it's a completely different job. And so taking over that position in January 1st, 2020, and kind of not knowing what was ahead is kind of the other, piece of all of that.
Okay, we'll have to get into that, but can you explain what is included in your role as president and CEO?
Yeah, so I oversee 3 organizations. So we have the Chamber of Commerce, where we work with over 700 member businesses and also nonprofits. We have a full-time staff of 8. Some people are surprised to hear that. Lots of chambers are organized in different ways. So sometimes you have a chamber that just represents one city. We are a regional chamber, so we work with businesses in Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, and Agoura Hills, so the whole Conejo Valley region. We also have some members that are from other cities, but that's kind of our primary market that we serve. And then we have a tourism district that we run called Visit Conejo Valley. And so we work to increase overnight stays for our hotel properties in the cities of Thousand Oaks and Agoura Hills. So we're basically marketing Conejo Valley as a low impact tourism area. So think about sporting events and weddings and things that would, drive leisure and group travel into our area to fill our hotels. And then we have a small foundation that we run as well. That we have a couple of programs under, including our Education Council and Leadership Conejo. And we utilize those revenues primarily to distribute nonprofit grants in the community. So I oversee all 3 of those organizations and our team of 7 plus me. And we have a board of directors for each of those organizations. So I also have a board of 30 under the chamber. We have 15 on the tourism side, and then we have 9 on the foundation side. And so working with all of those different leadership groups to really make sure we're meeting our mission and our financials and kind of everything in between. And governance is a really important piece of the nonprofit work, especially when you're dealing with boards. And the tourism is a special district, so we have to operate under the Brown Act. So there's a lot of compliance pieces on that side as well.
My goodness. So that sounds like a big jump from events. I can imagine in events that you're wearing a lot of hats. There's a lot going on. But it sounds like with this president CEO role, 3 different separate operating organizations. How do you manage all of that?
I love what I do, and I think that's the piece that I always go back to, because it is a lot to manage. But at the end of the day, I think coming into the role, I knew that the piece that was probably my weakest point was honestly the advocacy piece. We work locally at the state level as well as at the federal level to make sure that we are weighing in on issues that would impact our local business community. And I did not have a government affairs background. Luckily, we have a director of government affairs, on our team that specializes in that area. Again, a lot of chambers that are smaller don't have those kind of, specialists to lean on, I would say, in a role like mine. So I felt, that I could kind of lean on that person during my learning curve, I would say. But the pandemic just really sped up the learning curve, because I really had no choice, because advocacy was at the top of the list during the pandemic, especially representing 2 counties. So we had Ventura County and Los Angeles County, and they were handling the pandemic very differently in regards to restrictions on businesses. And so we were very active during that time to make sure that the voice of business was really at the table with our elected officials that were making really, really timely decisions. I mean, we've never really seen policies happen that quickly, right? Then in a state of emergency. So usually you have a lead time leading up to all this. You kind of can get all your ducks in a row and make sure you have all your positions lined up, and things were moving so rapidly during that time. But it also allowed me to create a lot of relationships in a short time frame that probably would have honestly taken me years to build in this position, from the local cities to the county level to the state level. And so, no one wants to go through a pandemic again, but that for me is probably a silver lining piece, stepping into the role during that time frame.
Yeah, wow. That is had to expedite the learning curve and really, throw you into the fire. And what timing, man, that's wild. And I didn't think about it, that it covers two different counties, and that's and like you said, who are operating very differently, I feel like, during that time.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, interesting. Is it usual for Chamber of Commerce to potentially be on the border of these two different counties, or is it Conejo Valley sort of unique in that?
I think most chambers operate within one county.
Okay.
So it's pretty unique for us, but honestly, it wasn't as big of a piece prior to the pandemic. I mean, yes, there's a whole other layer of kind of officials that you're working with from a regional standpoint on, especially with the size of the counties, right? So you have Ventura County that's less than 1 million people, and you have LA County that's 10 million people. So it's a very different dynamic as far as, access and, influence and, making sure you're really at the table during those conversations. That's much harder to do in such a large county. And our cities that we represent within that county are a very small piece of the overall county that they represent.
Right, of course. Interesting. What is the mission of the chamber?
So we're really focused on promoting business and strengthening economic growth in Conejo Valley through leadership, advocacy, and programming. That is really our 3 driving pillars. So we're, economic development is kind of at the top of our list. We've been doing a lot of work on the housing front locally, especially in the city of Thousand Oaks. We've basically been a slow growth community for the last decade. Potentially no growth in a lot of areas. And so, we just had our economic summit with Dr. Fina from CLU, and we are now the least affordable county in Ventura in the entire United States. And so it's very challenging from an employer standpoint when you're trying to recruit talent to the area. And one, just the lack of inventory. There's just not enough housing. And then you are dealing with kind of affordability on the other side of the aspects. So we've gotten over 2,000 units approved in the last 2 years, which is a big deal for the city of Thousand Oaks, a city that size and kind of the history of not approving a lot of housing. So we feel like we're making progress. We also just got the general plan passed for the city of Thousand Oaks. So our chamber was involved over the last 4 years, just making sure we had input from a business community side in what that general plan would look like once it was updated. And it's really just going to lay the groundwork, especially in the land use category, for how our community is going to, grow in a very strategic way. I think that's one of the other things from a chamber standpoint. We are very respectful of wanting to keep our, single family neighborhoods intact, right? I live in the community, my family lives in the community, my friends live in the community. I get it. And I try to definitely look at the lens from both sides, from the business and the residents' perspective. Because, a lot of the business owners in our community also live in our community. And so everyone wants a good quality of life. No one wants to sacrifice that, right? And so how can we look at things strategically as we move forward and put housing in the right spot and be able to redevelop? Because, the pandemic did shake things up in a lot, shorter timeline than we thought. And so the general plan really provides the flexibility on some of these, lots to, envision, can it be a mixed use project? Should it be just housing? retail is shifting. We need to look at things differently in that degree. And I think as long as we do it with a really clear vision that's, been laid out, we will be able to really find opportunity rather than look at it as, something that we were necessarily forced into finding new uses for. I think bringing people closer to businesses and having residential closer to, Thousand Oaks Boulevard, for example, like that's what our young professionals are looking for. They want to be able to be in their apartment and walk down to Tarantula Brewing and grab dinner. And we just don't really have that option to a large degree right now. We have 2 mixed-use projects that are currently built on the boulevard, 1710 and then Santel. And so those are kind of our first 2 really living proof of this concept. And not everyone is going to want to live in that type of project, but I think a lot of people do. And so just providing the diversity of options for people who are looking at our community to be able to envision themselves living here, because if they haven't been here and they're a biotech firm that's trying to recruit from, across the US, and we're competing with other, destinations like Boston and Austin and, up in the Bay Area, and people need to be able to feel like this is a community they can really see themselves in.
Yes. And I learned a little bit about the Boulevard project from Drew Plitcher, who was here for speaking about Oak and Iron. And as somebody who lives in Thousand Oaks and right off of Herbs, actually, and about walking distance to the 1710 Boulevard, I think that there is value in it. One thing that people, I guess, 98% of the people I've interviewed have said their favorite thing about Conejo Valley is open space and going hiking. Yeah. And so it's like finding that balance, right? Of how do you still keep that people are coming here for, but also walkability to the amazing businesses that are also have been here or are starting up, and be able to provide that flexibility of life, I think is, I personally agree with that vision and finding a way to do it. And I was one of those who moved here during the pandemic. So, from LA, and, there's it's a great place to raise kids, but, desiring a little bit of that accessibility is also part of it too. So
yeah, and you talk about Santel, you have, multiple restaurants going in there. Boss is opening up their second location. We have Fish going in. We have Joybirds. That's been one of the other really fun things that we've seen over the last, couple of years, is some of our independent businesses, expanding within Conejo Valley. Yes. You have 507 that opened their second location on the boulevard. And I love seeing those stories. And even Mouthful. I mean, I remember going to their soft opening when they were literally like just a small little alley of a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And now to see Luis in this, much expanded space and, front patio, and kind of seeing their journey. We just celebrated 5 years with Made in Italy, one of our other small businesses, with Gianna and Antonio, and just being able to see their journey along the way in this role, like that, it's just really inspirational. These businesses, they work so hard, and to see value in expanding in our own community and not looking, to other areas to expand, I think that says a lot about the culture and the support of the community that we've built here.
And are you focused, when it comes to businesses, on that, like having businesses expand within the area or bringing new businesses in? I imagine it's a mix.
I think it's a combination, right? Yeah. So we always want to make sure that, primarily the city is, playing the largest role in, working with companies that want to expand and potentially come here. We're trying to make sure from a chamber perspective that we have a great community that we can attract to these businesses too. And so that's what we really look at our role as. And then once they're here, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to instantly connect with the business community at large. And so working with, our membership with large companies like Amgen and Los Robles, all the way down to mostly small businesses, you kind of have this really wide representation across the community. And so when someone is new opening a business and they come to a breakfast and they get to meet 100 people, in 90 minutes in their own community, and be able to start building those connections and relationships, that has a huge amount of value to it, especially if they're not from this area, to be able to start to build all of those different pieces of connection within the community, the nonprofits, the other small businesses, potentially larger businesses becoming their clients, depending on what industry they're in. So all of it is just this big ecosystem that really kind of builds and feeds itself to make this really vibrant business community that we have today. And I think it's really important to also, recognize that the business community here is what is a big piece of what provides the quality of life that we all enjoy here in Conejo Valley, right? All of the tax revenues and all of everything that comes from the business community side is helping to fund our fire and our police and our parks and all the things that we really enjoy in our community. And so I always kind of try to, I don't think most residents think about that. And I certainly wouldn't have either before I worked for the chamber. But I think it's, important to realize when we have something like the auto mall that generates a huge amount of sales tax for our city, those are really assets in our community, and they help us to be able to deliver really quality services from the city side for all of our residents in our three cities.
That's a great point. What are some of the programs that you mentioned? You said the breakfast with, you can be in front of 100 business leaders. I know you run a lot of programs like that. For example, it's like the Emerging Leaders Happy Hour, I believe. Can you share some of those places that people can get involved?
Yeah, so we do a breakfast basically quarterly, and that has the kind of the 20-second intros that everyone can see who's in the room, so who they want to talk to after or before. And then we have what we've called our Elevated Breakfast Series. We just did one in early April with all of our civic leaders from our region. So we had Supervisor Horvath, we had Dr. Svet Johnson, who's the CEO of Ventura County, and then we had representatives on the elected side from all three of our cities. And we really had a discussion around a lot of economic development, housing, Prop 1, all these kind of relevant issues. We're going to have an education breakfast with our educational leaders. We had all of our university presidents along with our superintendents out last year, and we are going to rebuild that panel. We do a quarterly mixer at different locations. So the breakfast is a little more structured for people who are looking to kind of, have a table to sit at, have a group of people. The mixers are much more kind of like a cocktail hour format, but it's easy and simple. You can just drop by for 30 minutes if that's all you have in the evening. You don't have to be a member to drop by to any of our events. There's just a little bit of an upcharge for people who are looking to join that are not a member. And then we have our signature events. So we do we just did our economic summit where we brought out the president of California Chamber of Commerce, and she provided us an update from the state level. And then we had Dr. Feenup do the economic forecast. We do our 40 Under 40 awards where we recognize young professionals in the community. We talk about, wanting to attract our young professionals to the community, but I think it's really important that we're recognizing the work of, our young professionals that are actually here and doing the work. So that's a program I think this is the 9th year. And that was one of the programs that I had started in my previous role, along with the Emerging Leaders Group with our young professionals that meets monthly at different restaurants. We kind of provide a little bit of food. Everyone buys their own beverages, and it's just like a really easy connection point to build relationships. And, we have people who started in that group when it was first, created that are still involved. And so it's nice to see that. And it's also, for our larger employers who are looking to, get their team members involved, it's something that's really simple that they can just kind of drop by. They don't have to be members. It's very casual in that environment. And then we have more structured networking groups that are just for our chamber members that are category exclusive, a couple of them. Some of them are open category. And so if people are looking for connections that they're really looking to build over time. Those are groups of about, 20 to 30 people that they're really building referral networks with. We have a group that serves primarily our senior population, our Conejo Senior Network. And so there's lots of ways to get involved. I always say, like on our new member orientation, like the chamber is a little bit like a buffet. So you really got to kind of go down the line and like really see what works best, because, you know, someone that has a large business is looking for very different things than someone has, you know, that is entrepreneur and has just started or has a restaurant or things of that nature. You know, our larger employers are really interested in what we're doing on the policy side of things from a community benefit standpoint. Our smaller members, they want connections, they want a network, they are really looking for, you know, transactional benefit to make sure that they're seeing that value from our chamber. And so we really, you know, do our very best to kind of meet all the needs across those lines. But that's why it's really great that we have a team that can help businesses really plug in where we think they're going to see the most value. You know, Heather is our vice president of community partnerships, and when people join, she's a listener 90% of the time and talks probably 10% of the time, because she really wants to understand that business, their needs, and where she thinks that they would fit in best with the chamber. The networking groups, they can go visit all of them before they commit to one. So it's really just finding, you know, kind of a couple of things. I always tell businesses, don't get overwhelmed. Just start with a couple of things, and then you can kind of build from there, and you'll get a feel for, you know, where you're really, you know, it's kind of like dating, right? You're going to get a sense of like, you know, this is where the direction I want to go. So
yeah. Well, having attended those emerging leader, a couple of the happy hours, it's totally true. They're casual, but intimate enough where you do get to meet people and have nice conversations and connect and make those relationships. So the fact that you're doing it at like such a scale, depending on where you are within your business journey, is amazing. And I think that those like IRL, like in real life connection points are so important when you're trying to get out there and start.
And I don't know if you've gotten to taste the Conejo yet, but that's one of our other really popular programs.
When is that?
That's basically our big food and wine festival.
Okay.
It'll be in October this year over at the Hyatt. And we bring out, you know, over 50 different, you know, restaurants, breweries, wineries, and you get to have a little bit of a taste of Conejo all under one roof. So you can kind of sample your favorites and then hopefully find some new favorites. And that is something that draws really heavily also from the community side, not just, you know, directly from our members, but the community really likes to kind of experience all those different tastings. We have live entertainment. It's just really fun.
I will go this year. I have not been before, so that is good to put on the calendar for October. So let's get into what is one of the projects or initiatives or things in your role as president and CEO that you're most proud of?
I think currently it still has to go back to the pandemic because I felt like our chamber had so much impact during that time. We provided over $100,000 in grants through our foundation directly to our business community. And you know, while it's a small amount in the grand scheme of things, a lot of chambers were not directly distributing money. They were working with, you know, their cities and counties and different partners. And some of the money raised, we certainly garnered from our cities. But to be able to go through that process, not charge an administration fee, and make sure that those dollars were back in the hands of our businesses is something I'm really proud of. And then, you know, we were able to get LA County, we were part of kind of the coalition that, you know, asked them to, you know, basically, you know, align with Ventura County with the state standards so that our businesses could operate outdoors and that we would have, you know, equal access across our region for our businesses specifically. And we were able to get that done at that time, which was a really big lift. We had over 100 businesses on the LA County side that stepped up to be part of the coalition. We're calling into the Board of Supervisors meeting, which we couldn't even go into at the time. And so we were operating in a very different landscape and just coming together to be able to make that kind of impact. Super proud of our team and our businesses to be able to pull that off.
Yes, and especially so early on in your tenure in that role is pretty impressive. What would you say has been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is how many partners and people that we work with. So, when you talk about 700 businesses, 15 council members, you know, 2 county supervisors, we work with the school districts. And so while it's, really rewarding to be part of all of those different community leaders and organizations, it's also a lot to manage, and you can't make everyone happy 100% of the time. And that's okay, nor should we agree on everything. And that's what I tell people. We all have kind of our own drives and missions, and sometimes those sync up really nicely. And sometimes there's a bit of overlap or there is disconnect, and that's all right. When I'm in front of city council, I could be saying something that, 80% of the room doesn't agree with. But that's part of my job, and that's part of the drive is, our organization is tasked with being the voice of business. And sometimes that's not always the most popular position. And so, making sure you're able to, do your job in that degree to be the voice of business, but also make sure all the relationships are intact along the way when your position is not the most popular with whoever might be on the other side of an issue.
I know you have a lot of stakeholders to to work with, so I am not envious of that, but it sounds like you have success in that. Is there something from your prior role or schooling that helped you, that you feel like is a skill that you learned that could help you with all those relationships, or maybe you've always just been kind of good at keeping relationships?
I think relationships have always been part of my roles, and so that's very helpful. But honestly, just being born and raised in this community, I think, is what gives me a little bit of leg up in the role. And I feel like part of a big piece of my job is just making sure I'm informed, because there is a lot of things that are constantly changing. And so we got to have the most current and accurate information to be working with to make sure we're making decisions and are at the table when things are being discussed. So I think having that local connection definitely helps to be able to build on all of those other issues that arise along the way. And having some of that background in place really helps me with a lot of the relationships that I am building locally.
What's your vision for the chamber?
My vision is just that every business feels welcome. That is really kind of our driving force behind our mission. 700 feels like a lot, but it's really not when you look at the entirety of the business community. And we just want to make sure that businesses know that there's something for everyone here. And that's why we are so intentional when we talk about our leadership, from a board perspective, that, we don't just have a bunch of large companies on our board, right? We want to make sure that the makeup of our leadership is really reflective of the business community at large. And so we are very deliberate in that mission to make sure that, all the voices are at the table. And I know not all of them are right now. And so we are working really hard to make sure that our outreach is, touching businesses in the community to the largest degree that we can.
With that, we go to our rapid fire questions, and this kind of piggybacks after that last question. What do you think is the number one reason a business should join the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce?
I honestly think it's to be part of something bigger than themselves. I think we can accomplish so much more collectively than we can as individuals. And that's where I really see value in our organization.
What's your favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley?
Well, since you said everyone else says hiking, I was just on Autumn Moon Trail this weekend, but I really enjoy our parks. As my kids get older, they're outgrowing them to a degree, but having our parks locally in our community, I love sitting on a bench with coffee and looking at, our beautiful views. That's, it's fun and easy.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And lastly, what is one piece of advice you would give to a first-time entrepreneur?
I would say, I always operate under my kind of mantra is pick your battles. And so I know when you're an entrepreneur, there's 100 things that you're trying to juggle. And sometimes you just got to prioritize the most important pieces in that moment in time. And so I think that especially when you're starting a business, it's hard because you're trying to do it all. And you really kind of got to pick out the pieces that are really going to set your business apart to make sure that you resonate with your target audience and your customers.
I love that. I have one last question that I meant to ask earlier, but speaking of that, like as a first-time entrepreneur, understanding how to prioritize, even how to create a business plan, that's usually what I like to ask business owners too. Do I remember correctly that the chamber offers resources like that where people can better understand their how business, what they need, resources and things to start a business?
So we have a program called Elevate Conejo Valley, which is basically a small business workshop series. Mm-hmm. And it covers a variety of different topics from marketing, finance, technology. And so we use that on the educational side for businesses that are really looking to build out some of those areas. But we also have close relationships with the Economic Development Collaborative that serves Ventura County. So if businesses, we paired our cohort up for Elevate Conejo Valley last year with the EDC. And so they were able to have one-on-one business consulting as follow-ups to all the workshops and, anything that they want to discuss, honestly. And so, the chamber can't be everything from a business standpoint. So we really like to make sure we have strong partnerships with the other resources locally so we can make sure that we're kind of meeting the needs on the chamber side and then cross promoting some of the other resources locally, because the EDC, they do work on business plans. They have the one-on-one consulting. They do a lot of loans also for people who are looking for expansion or start a business. They do a lot of financing as well.
That's amazing. Great. Well, Danielle, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing not only your story, but what the chamber is doing for businesses and the economic growth in the area. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Well, I just want to thank you for sharing the stories of our local businesses, because I think everyone wants to support local businesses. And sometimes it's just about, making sure people know they're there. And so I just appreciate you sharing, the faces and the stories behind these businesses. It's very hard to run a small business, and I don't think people necessarily realize some of the sweat and tears that go into getting something off the ground. And when we do ribbon cuttings locally, that's one of the biggest pieces for people that have spent maybe a year building out their space or developing that business plan 5 years ago that now they're finally launching, and to see it all come to life. It's a very emotional thing for people, and being alongside them during the journey is very special.
Well, it has been a great pleasure to do it. And it's, there's a person behind all of these businesses, and our stories are unique, but also relatable. So it's been fun to tell them and help people get them out there. And hopefully we can do more of that in the future.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, Danielle. That was Danielle Borja, President and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. To enter to win 2 VIP tickets to the Taste of Conejo in October, all you have to do is go at Conejo Chamber and at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram and leave a comment on the latest post of Conejo Valley Visionaries with your favorite part of this interview. To get an extra entry, screenshot the episode and share it on your stories, tagging at Conejo Chamber and at Conejo Valley Visionaries. Good luck. Make sure to subscribe to Conejo Valley Visionaries wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And follow us at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram to learn more about each guest and enter our weekly giveaways. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us a DM. We are always open to guest nominations. This episode was produced by Christina Denstead and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J. Sloan Productions.